On July 14th, 2019, I woke up, picked up my phone, and noticed that my group chat was buzzing about something. And I looked at it, and it was a photo of my friend, and it looked like she was dead. So I was reading all the messages, and they're saying, guys, like, in the Discord, someone posted that Bianca is, like, dead or something. And I was like, what? Some people in the Discord actually had to call the police.
Utica Police.
Good morning. I believe someone may have been murdered.
Okay, where?
Okay, so I'm on an online group, and somebody posted a picture of someone getting murdered, and I believe it to be a Miss Bianca Michelle Devins.
Before I knew it, the photo was being circulated around my community and then beyond it.
So tell me, what did you see that day?
I was on Twitter, as I usually do, just to gauge what stories are trending that day, and I saw that Bianca's name was trending. I didn't know very much at that point, just that images had been posted and were going viral on social media. And I just knew that I wanted to find out more.
I think we were all just very confused. Someone saw something on the internet where they thought, Bianca may have been hurt. I am Kim Devins, and I'm Bianca's mother.
Bianca is a talented artist, aspiring model. I knew she had an online presence, but I found that granddaughters do not share their online presence with their grandfathers. So I wasn't aware of the depth of it.
Social media was a huge part of Bianca's life, and online, she could be whoever she wanted to be.
She was definitely a social media chameleon. She had multiple Instagram accounts, which is not uncommon for kids her age, but one of them was clearly reserved for her online friends, was fairly edgy. She was obviously very, popular on Discord.
It was common for some people in the community to try and escape, or maybe to get attention, to fake their deaths.
As this photo is circulating on Discord and then to other social media platforms, the authenticity of the photo is being debated. A lot of people are unsure whether or not it's real. People were making memes out of the images. They were turning them into jokes.
They were sent to me. They were sent to various family members.
So this is a collection of different communications received by Bianca's mom. And obviously every one of them meant to be incredibly cruel, incredibly hurtful. This is a form of psychological terrorism.
I just don't understand the cruelty and the emptiness in someone's heart, where they would get some kind of a thrill out of sending these pictures to a family.
I remember just standing up and saying, no, it's not her. I stomped up my stairs saying, it's not her, it can't be, it's not her, it's not my baby.
July 14th, 2019. It was a beautiful day in Utica. It was our Boilermaker Road Race, which is a well-known 15K road race where participants from across the world come to run.
As the first runners crossed the finish line, Utica police detectives Brian Coramato and Michael Curley heard alarming reports of a possible murder.
Certainly nothing prepared us for a homicide on that day.
The horrific photos spreading on the social media platform Discord had prompted calls from around the country.
Okay, what's the female's name?
Bianca Michelle Devins.
I'm hoping the girl's just bleeding badly and maybe still alive.
People didn't know if it was real or not. We needed to find her to make sure, to see if she was all right.
Police body cameras were rolling as officers arrived at 17-year-old Bianca Devins' home to perform a welfare check. When did you first learn that your daughter was missing?
There was a knock at our door.
Is there a Bianca Devins that lives here?
Yeah, why? My daughter Olivia answered the door. She came up to me and said, "Mom, the police are here. There's something going on with Bianca."
The police didn't show Bianca's mother, Kim, the photo, but said they feared her daughter might be in danger.
Can you try to get a hold of your daughter?
Yeah. And what were you thinking at that moment?
I was so confused. I didn't know where Bianca was.
It went right to voicemail.
Kim told police she last saw Bianca the day before as she headed with friends to this concert in New York City. How was her mood when she left?
I remember Bianca being so excited. I left her alone for most of the night, just giving her space, and this was her first real adult concert.
Bianca texted her mother after the concert to say she was heading home. Bianca was enjoying her newfound freedom, Kim says, after graduating high school 2 weeks earlier. But her journey to get there hadn't been easy. At what point did you realize she needed help?
Bianca first saw a therapist at 9 years old. She was having some separation anxiety, didn't want to go to school, just wanted to stay home with me. And then around 13, Bianca started showing signs of depression.
As Bianca isolated herself from others, she started to spend more time on social media.
She really could just escape her own mental struggles, what was going on in her head, and escape into, a different world online.
Hi, it's like 6 in the morning and I'm currently editing this, but I just wanted to let you know that I'm so funny.
How prevalent was Bianca on social media?
She was extremely prevalent on social media. She had a large presence on many platforms.
Reporter E.J. Dixon covered Bianca's story for Rolling Stone magazine and says the internet has a name for the type of character Bianca portrayed online. What's an e-girl?
An e-girl it's basically a term used to describe a certain type of aesthetic. It's like a very edgy, dark aesthetic, different colored hair.
But Bianca's behavior was growing increasingly erratic. At age 16, she was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, an illness which Kim believes led to Bianca's varying mood swings and affected her self-image.
Bianca was very smart. She was very intuitive and self-aware. So she always knew something was wrong, and she knew she needed help.
And there she is with Belle, right on the couch in the living room.
Bianca sought treatment, says her grandfather Frank, and eventually returned to her role as a devoted big sister to Olivia and Maddie.
We all said that Bianca's back. That's our girl. And there was this glow in her eyes that when she talked about going to college and what she was going to do with her life.
Bianca immersed herself in her art and was even getting noticed as a promising young model.
She would, get lots of compliments from models and agents, and she really felt good about herself when she was modeling.
Though she had turned a corner, Bianca maintained her edgy online persona, and by age 17, had created multiple identities.
She also had an active presence on 4chan, which is sort of on the darker side of the web. I go on the record saying 4chan is a dangerous place, and it's also just an incredibly, incredibly misogynistic space.
As Bianca's popularity grew online, so did the number of some of her male followers called orbiters, says online friend Elizabeth.
The reason why they're called orbiters is because they will follow like a girl they think is attractive online and, just like orbit them, never become close to them.
Bianca was exceptionally patient and accessible to her orbiters, to a fault at times.
One orbiter who captured Bianca's attention was a 21-year-old Lyft driver named Brandon Clark, whom she met on Instagram in May of 2019.
What was he like?
Honestly, nothing notable. He was just kind of like a normal, one of these weird people, you know, one of these weird guys in the community.
After communicating on social media, they eventually took their relationship offline and briefly dated, but were never exclusive.
Bianca had made it clear to Brandon that she was not interested in a committed monogamous relationship at this point, and Brandon had seemed to accept that.
When Brandon came around, and he came around pretty often, he just looked like a goofy, nerdy boy next door.
Kim says there were no glaring red flags about Clark, so when Bianca told her mother he was taking her to that concert in New York City, Kim thought nothing of it.
I took a little comfort in knowing that she would be with Brandon because I trusted him.
We'll stay here. 40's on pulse.
As the search continued,
Copy, 47.
Bianca's friends suspected the photos circulating on Discord might be a hoax after learning it was Clark who posted the image.
We all just assumed that he was making a joke or trying to scare us or something.
On Discord, it's fairly common for people to post gore and disturbing images just to sort of get a rise out of people. So it was certainly within the realm of possibility that this could have been faked.
Dispatch to all units.
But things turned very real, very fast.
We have him on the line now.
When it was Clark who called 911.
My name is Brandon. The victim is Bianca Michelle Devins.
It was like an out-of-body experience, but I was shaking. I just kept thinking, no, she's fine. We just have to find her, and we're going to get her help. She's going to be okay.
As Bianca's family awaited news of her safety, police dispatch received a call.
911, what is the emergency?
My name is Brandon. The victim is Bianca Michelle Devins. I'm going to kill myself.
The officers at the Devins home could hear what was unfolding on their radios.
He was going to kill himself.
Brandon, is that her ex or boyfriend, or apparently he's suicidal. He's made statements saying that he hurt your daughter.
It didn't make sense to me. I remember just being very confused that they were saying that Brandon may have hurt her. It just didn't make sense that he would have hurt her.
Investigators turned their attention to Brandon Clark, who by then had posted more disturbing pictures of Bianca, including one with this message, "I'm sorry, Bianca."
We were fighting against time. We needed to find her. And we needed to find her fast.
And he's not telling us where he is. They're basically pinging his phone.
The dispatcher tried to keep Clark talking until police could pinpoint his location.
Just stay on the line with me, okay?
No, I'm not going to stay in line with you. I'm going to be dead on the ground.
But before hanging up, Clark told them exactly where to find him, a dead-end road not far from Bianca's home.
Describe for me, where was Brandon and what was he doing?
Brandon's vehicle was parked up ahead of here. An officer pulled up and he observes Brandon.
Hi. What are you doing, man?
Brandon's armed with a knife.
He has his gun pointed at him.
Yeah, he engages him.
Put the knife down, man. Put the knife down.
There's a conversation back and forth.
Where's the girl? Where is she?
As the officer moved into position, Clark slashed himself with a knife. He then took a selfie and posted it to social media with the caption, "Ashes to ashes."
Ultimately, backup arrives. They engage him in front of his vehicle.
After a brief struggle, Clark was disarmed and placed under arrest.
When I arrived on scene, Brandon was actually just being wheeled out to the ambulance.
As paramedics raced to save Clark's life, investigators made a grim discovery: the body of a young woman hidden beneath a tarp. Detective Coramato knew they had found Bianca.
The news has got this, so you better send somebody to the mom's house to give her a heads up before.
But before police could make that call, Kim says she had already learned the painful truth.
And Olivia was in the kitchen with her friend, and we heard the most excruciating scream that you've ever heard come out of a teenager.
Someone had texted Bianca's family the horrific photo.
I just kept screaming, it's not her. It's not her, it's not my baby.
I knew it was her. And I said to myself, I'm going to be strong. Get my family through this.
This wasn't a whodunit. We know who did it. We had to work backwards to figure out why this happened.
Investigators started at the crime scene.
As we were learning about Brandon, every single thing he did at the crime scene meant something to him.
Prosecutors Sarah DeMillier and Michael Nolan would lead the investigation for the Oneida County District Attorney's Office and began with a cryptic message Clark spray-painted at the scene.
As this case was going, one of the things we saw was that "May you never forget me." The first thing we did, and I think everybody does now as a prosecutor, something you don't know, you Google it.
Investigators learned that message was taken from a series of Japanese comic books called Pun Pun that Clark and Bianca had often read together.
The books are dark, they're violent, and it's almost a Japanese dark version of Romeo and Juliet. Does he have some very skewed picture that his relationship with Bianca is a star-crossed lover scenario?
And there was something else investigators found unusual about the scene.
The other thing that I think we found particularly eerie was the music at the crime scene.
Using a Bluetooth speaker, Clark had programmed his cell phone to play a particular song on repeat.
And that song was, we later learned, Test Drive by Joji, about a person who is more invested in the relationship than somebody else.
To understand exactly what was happening between Bianca and Clark that night, investigators began reviewing their social media accounts and soon learned the two weren't alone at the concert.
It wasn't just Bianca and Brandon. In fact, they were accompanied by another person, another guy.
Direct messages from Bianca's Discord account reveal she had invited a new friend named Alex and was concerned Brandon might get jealous. Prosecutors tracked him down.
He was very helpful in explaining the last moments that he spent with Bianca, that Brandon really seemed to not want Alex there.
Investigators learned that after Brandon and Bianca left the concert, she texted Alex to say, "I think he saw me kiss you."
When we do learn that there is a kiss at the concert, we need to explore, was it a crime of passion, if you will? Was it a snap?
Just before dawn, as they headed back to Utica, Clark made this ominous post on social media.
Brandon has posted a photograph of what appears to be the New York State Thruway. And in that post, he says, "Here comes hell, it's redemption," right?
Even as investigators questioned what had happened after that and where, nothing could have prepared them for what they would soon uncover.
We found out that there was a video of the murder. This is a horror film playing out in real life.
It's early in the morning when I go into the office, and we get a call from the police department. They tell us, you know, there's something that you have to see here.
The day after the murder of Bianca Devins, prosecutors Sarah DeMillier and Michael Nolan went down to the Utica Police Department. Overnight, investigators had conducted a forensic analysis of Brandon Clark's cell phone and found something terrifying.
They set us up with a computer, some speakers, and some headphones, and push play, and that's when we see that there is a video made by Brandon of him killing Bianca.
I think it wasn't until that very moment that we realized this was probably the most horrible, terrible thing that either of us have ever seen in our life, and as a prosecutor.
Many of the details are too gruesome to describe.
Bianca appears to be sleeping, and the back seat is folded out so that it's flat. He then takes his camera and he clips it to almost one of those vents that would be on the front dash. What we see from there is the beginning of the homicide, where Brandon reaches into the back. He collects from the back seat a knife, indicating to us it's something he came prepared with. And he hides it at the right-hand side of the car. We see that he wakes Bianca up, and he goes about having a conversation with her.
Then DeMillier says Brandon asked Bianca about that kiss she had with Alex, the other young man at the concert the night before.
He tells her, you know, I saw you kiss him, right? And she says, yeah, and I'm sorry. And he says, well, I'm sorry is not good enough. It's just not good enough for him.
DeMillier says it's then that Bianca reminded Clark they were not exclusive.
And she basically says, are you ready to take me home yet? And at this point, with Brandon realizing this might be the end of the time that the two of them are going to spend together, we see him grab the knife. She does not see it coming.
DeMillier says Clark then killed Bianca.
And then he blames her. He screams dramatically into the camera, you know, Bianca, why did you make me do this? Like it's her fault, and it's not.
It was after he finished filming the video that Clark took those graphic photos of Bianca and posted them on social media.
And I know that if she had gotten out of that car, she would have called me.
Bianca's mother and grandfather have never seen the video, but heard of its contents early on in the investigation.
I was 10 minutes away. If she had just been able to get out of that car, but he caught her completely off guard.
Does that haunt you today?
It does. I was so close.
And she fought him.
She
That's
did.
the
She fought
thing
back.
that impressed me most was she fought for her life.
But the sickening murder video wasn't the only important piece of evidence investigators found on Clark's cell phone. They learned that he was intent on killing Bianca long before the events of that night.
We learned that Brandon is meticulous in his categorization, itemization of things that he wants to do.
2 days before killing Bianca, Clark utilized the Notes app on his smartphone and typed a sinister checklist.
I would just describe this list as the to-do list, the things that he needs to do to carry out his plan and to stage his crime scene.
Set up speaker and last song, question mark.
And that's not all. Clark did multiple internet searches, some the day before the murder, researching ways to kill.
He searched how to choke someone out, how to hit the carotid artery to kill someone.
More evidence, investigators say, that this was not a crime of passion.
Brandon had this planned. He had the video staged. He had the phone staged. He knew exactly what he was doing.
We believe that when this relationship came to an end was when he was going to kill her.
Brandon wanted to be with her. She did not want to be with him, and he wasn't going to let anybody else have her. So no matter what she said, she was going to wind up dead that night.
2 weeks after the murder, Bianca's family and friends packed the courtroom wearing pink, her favorite color, as they waited for Brandon Clark to make his first public appearance.
Brandon walked into the courtroom today wearing an orange jumpsuit and a black protective vest.
I was in court when they brought him in. I said, he just looks pathetic.
Clark was officially charged with second-degree murder and pleaded not guilty. The defense was considering an extreme emotional disturbance defense, but authorities and Bianca's family were not buying it.
Investigators and the prosecutors describe him as just an evil person that wanted to murder someone. And that's who Brandon is. He is a murderer. He is evil.
And as prosecutors prepared to go to trial, they had only one goal in mind.
We need justice for Bianca, and we need to make sure Brandon can never hurt anybody else again. That's what our job is.
But there was nothing they could do to stop what was going on online. The horrific images of Bianca's murder that Clark had posted continued to spread on the internet, and a vile campaign of hate was brewing on social media.
Bianca's family members were also being targeted as a result of Bianca's death. It was just nonstop harassment.
This is a form of psychological terrorism.
In the days following Bianca's murder, downtown Utica was lit up in pink in her honor, and a candlelight vigil was held to celebrate her life.
The magic dragon lives by the sea.
Supporters gathered to sing Puff the Magic Dragon, a song her grandfather Frank sang to Bianca as a child. A tradition she continued with her baby sister, Maddie.
Puff the Magic Dragon. It's the special song.
But as Bianca's family grieved, the images of her dead body had spilled from the fringes of the internet into mainstream social media.
I just can't understand why people would want to see it. This is real.
Frank believes those who shared the photos didn't see Bianca as a loving daughter or a cherished granddaughter. They didn't see her as a person at all.
These pictures aren't fictitious pictures taken from a movie. They're of a lovely, beautiful girl whose life was taken from her in a cruel way.
Bianca's death photos spread on the social media platforms Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. When you found out that your daughter's images were on Twitter,
it's heartbreaking. It's so exploitive of my daughter. I just thought of how embarrassed she would be, how heartbroken she would be.
Kim pleaded with social media companies to remove the images, but it took time.
They stayed on Instagram and Facebook for at least a couple of weeks.
Every time the photo was removed, another one would appear in its place, says reporter E.J. Dixon.
Unfortunately, extremely violent and disturbing images can circulate wildly on social media, and a lot of social media platforms don't have the infrastructure in place to prevent that from happening.
In response, some social media users led a grassroots effort to replace the death photos with messages of hope.
So Bianca's supporters tried to combat people trolling the hashtag by posting beautiful images of clouds, bunnies, ribbons, or fan art of Bianca, like we see here.
To what end?
They did it to push the death photos down in the search results.
But amid the battle to preserve Bianca's memory, Kim says her family became victims of vicious online trolls who relentlessly sent them the horrific photos.
They were sent to me. They were sent to various family members that were close to Bianca. Olivia's had to take a break from social media because there's always the risk of having to see her sister's death photo.
Along with the photos were hateful messages blaming Bianca for what happened to her, many of which are too graphic to show.
It's horrifying, it's traumatizing to see people saying that your daughter, this is my baby, that she deserved such a cruel end to her life.
They're in, direct messaging and text messages to the family. A very twisted need is being met by continuing to share these and trying to get these to Bianca's family. It actually furthers the physical crime.
Behavioral scientist Stephen Cremando believes the individuals most likely responsible for the attacks on Bianca's family belong to a community of online men called incels.
Incel is short for involuntary celibate. Incels are individuals, men, 21 or older, who have gone 6 months or longer without any sort of sexual activity, not by their own volition.
Incels see themselves as victims, says Cremando, in a never-ending struggle to win the affection of attractive women whom they refer to as Stacys.
Incels believe that they don't have any chance with Stacys at all.
Was Bianca considered a Stacy?
Bianca would be considered a Stacy.
Though Clark did not identify as an incel, he was celebrated by this dark community for what he did to Bianca.
The incel feels badly cheated to the point where it becomes just an obsessive thought that I need to strike back for the unfairness.
In fact, this violent rhetoric has led to murder. In 2014, a 22-year-old self-identified incel went on a deadly rampage in Isla Vista, California, killing 6 people. Since then, the intelligence community believes there have been more than a dozen mass killings in North America, resulting in 50 deaths attributed to incel ideology.
And as there's been more incel killings, has become more clear to us that there is, on the spectrum of incels, those at the extreme end who are certainly capable of murder. And because of that, it's recognized now as a terrorist threat.
We all knew that we were in the line of fire, and I was honestly afraid to leave my house.
The response to Bianca's murder by the incel community served as a wake-up call for friends like Elizabeth and other young women in their online world who realized they too could be targets.
Those same incel communities that were praising Brandon's actions were saying, oh, I wonder who's going to be next. I can't wait for the next victim or the next girl to be killed.
As Clark's case headed to trial, emotions ran high for Bianca's family, who feared her murder video would be played in court.
My last memory of Bianca is her full of life, so excited, soon to have to see her in her last moments, how she was brutally murdered, is absolutely traumatizing and something no one should ever see.
But shortly before his trial began in February 2020, Clark pleaded guilty to Bianca's murder.
I know that sorry's not enough. I know that I won't take back what I did.
He said he wanted to spare us from having to see the details of Bianca's murder.
Did you believe him?
I don't believe him.
Kim may have been right to be suspicious. Before sentencing, Clark changed his mind yet again and wanted to go to trial.
We know that he's playing a game with everybody.
Just 5 months after pleading guilty to murdering Bianca Devins, Brandon Clark was back in court to try and change his plea back to not guilty. This request infuriated the Devins family, who had already been through so much.
Don't play games. Take your punishment. Give this family some peace.
Bianca's mom said she knew why Clark now wanted to go to trial.
He found out that there were media and production companies interested in Bianca's story, and he wanted to be able to tell his side.
Clark wouldn't admit to that. Months later, he took the stand to plead his case.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
He blamed his former attorney, Luke Niebusch, a well-respected local public defender, for not visiting him enough in prison and pressuring him into pleading guilty.
He knew that I was a first-time offender and had no knowledge of the legal system, knowledge about court proceedings.
Can you state your name? Luke Niebusch?
On the stand, Niebusch said Clark's claims were not true.
I went to the United County Jail 15 times prior to this plea. And there were moments where I spent 4 or 5 hours with him. There were moments where I probably spent 2, maybe an average of 3.
He said, in fact, he was the one who encouraged his former client to plead not guilty and go to trial. But it was Clark who refused.
And again, whose idea was it to plead guilty to these charges?
It was Mr. Clark's.
And it was your intention to take this matter to trial?
Yes.
And during cross-examination, prosecutor Mike Nolan demolished Clark's argument about his supposed legal knowledge.
You're making claims that Mr. Niebusch didn't do his job, but you don't know that, correct?
With the resources I was provided, it looks like he did not do his job.
And again, what law school did you go to, Mr. Clark?
I did not go to law school.
Right. So you don't know that, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
The judge denied Brandon Clark's request to withdraw his guilty plea. And on March 16, 2021, nearly 2 years after Bianca was murdered, he was finally brought in to be sentenced.
Are there any family members that would like to address the court?
Yes, Your Honor.
Bianca's mother and grandfather had been waiting a long time to face Bianca's killer.
With the death of your child comes the most unimaginable, indescribable pain. A pain that time cannot heal and only seems to worsen.
But Brandon, for the cruel manner in which you took my granddaughter's life, for the total disregard you had for a human life, for the callous act in which you posted pictures of her murdered body on social media to gratify your own selfish purposes, you, Brandon, deserve to spend the rest of your life in prison.
Before the judge read his sentence, Clark gave a statement.
I hate myself for what I did. I'm so sorry that I put everyone through this. I'm so sorry that I put Bianca through this. I wish I could apologize to her and just apologize and just take it back, but...
Did you all believe his apology? Did you think it was sincere at all?
No.
Not sincere. That's part of his story, is to play oh, poor me. It's not about what he did to Bianca. It's all about him.
The judge also appeared unmoved by Clark's apology and gave him the maximum sentence for murdering Bianca, 25 years to life.
Our deepest thoughts now are with Bianca, our angel, who has given so much love to this family.
But despite their relief, Bianca's family knows their fight may not be over. After Clark serves 25 years in prison, he could be eligible for parole. He will be in his late 40s.
Did Bianca receive justice?
No. Justice would be Bianca being alive.
But the justice for Bianca now takes a different form.
Bianca's family is trying to turn their grief into action. They have worked with local politicians like then Congressman Anthony Brindisi to try and get Bianca's law passed.
And today we are putting social media companies on notice. We are taking substantive action on the federal level to bring the Devins family peace and ensure this never happens to another family again.
Bianca's law is a bill that would hold social media companies accountable for violent and graphic content that they allow on their platforms.
So we looked at that as a start for a series of laws and policies that would prevent death photos like Bianca's from being put up on social media.
They also have established a scholarship in Bianca's name.
And that will go to a student who is going to follow Bianca's ambitions of helping adolescents with mental health struggles like Bianca had.
How do you want Bianca to be remembered?
I want Bianca to be remembered for her smile, for her bright spirit, for her huge, caring heart. Bianca always wanted to help someone. Even in her worst struggles, when she couldn't help herself, she helped others.
And she will never, ever be forgotten.
"48 Hours. Don't miss an episode."
Aaron, this is Florida. Nothing strange here.
The house was beautiful. It was 4,000 square feet. It had a pool, a garage apartment. It was a great house. The only problem was upstairs. Some of the rooms were too small and just the functionality did not work for some families. I could understand why they'd want to renovate it.
When did you first meet Shanti and David?
Dave just called me on the phone and asked if I'd come by and take a look at the project. He said that they had done some work. I wasn't at all prepared for what I saw when I got there. They had fully disassembled this house to a degree that I'd never seen before. It was rather astonishing. It was largely wide open, like you're inside of a giant shoebox.
This house became more than just a project to David Tronis. It was his life. He obsessed on it. This house is the center point to the story and ultimately led to Shanti's demise. This case all started with a call to 911, placed at approximately 3:51 p.m. on April 24th, 2018 by Dave Tronis.
Hello?
And David says that he came home and found Shanti floating in the bathtub.
Why is she not breathing?
Did that story make sense?
Absolutely not. Shanti was extensively beaten.
It makes me emotional. I feel bad for her family and for her son. It's upsetting that she won't get that life with him.
Clearly, Dave Tronis, from the very beginning, is a suspect.
Absolutely. Dave was asked to go to the station and voluntarily remain there for hours.
Just have a seat there. It'll be a little bit. He did not request counsel. He consented to swabs, to clippings, to a search of his person.
Dave went into that interview with an agenda.
I've never been more in love or so happy.
And he just started getting confronted and confronted and confronted.
I told you she was murdered. Murdered. Someone took her life from her, and there's nothing. You can't even fake it. That's how much you could give it.
And it became a war of wills in that room.
I don't have any explanation for the severity of her injuries.
And didn't David win that war of wills? He was not broken.
Well, Dave didn't confess.
Are we boring you?
It seems pretty clear, these two detectives, they went into this room, decided that David was a murderer, and then went the extra mile to try to put a file together to prove such.
Did you guys get into an argument? Was she about the house?
No.
Is it possible that without this house, Shanti might still be alive?
I think that's completely true.
Delaney Park is a well-established neighborhood. It's been around for over 100 years.
Tara Stevens knows Delaney Park inside and out. She's a realtor who buys and sells homes there.
It's a great place to live, to raise a family, a lot of outside activity, great school system. It's a great neighborhood.
So Delaney Park is a mile or so from downtown Orlando.
Ryan Vecchio, a former prosecutor with the Orlando State Attorney's Office, got to know the area well when he led the investigation into the death of Shanti Cooper in April 2018. Did Shanti ever indicate to any friends or family that she was afraid of anyone?
No.
So you guys knew each other approximately 5 years this month?
Vecchio and investigators dug in to learn all they could about Shanti and her husband, David Trones. The couple had been married for more than a year.
Everybody we spoke to about Dave and Dave's background said that he was highly intelligent. It's what made him successful when he worked in business.
How would you describe Shanti?
Shanti Cooper was a hard-working, dedicated mom who cared deeply, deeply about her son. Her son was her world.
Shanti's son, Jackson, was then 8 years old. She shared custody with his father, Jim Cooper, whom Shanti had divorced in 2013. She launched a lucrative financial software business and worked out of her home office. How did she meet Dave Trones?
Dave was outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota at the time. They met over the internet and started exchanging messages and profiles, and that turned into emails.
Investigators later found this document on Shanti's computer that shows just how smitten she was. Dave, I will have to say, I think this will be a delicious detour. Amazing, magnificent, life-changing detour. I've had a pep in my step since we started this little email affair. In Minnesota, Dave had just ended a long marriage, but within months of meeting Shanti online, he moved to Orlando. Dave fell in love with Delaney Park and the house at 218 East Copeland Drive, a house that came complete with its own gargoyles.
We sold it to him for $607,500, which was a really, really good deal.
How did he pay for it?
Cash.
Dave put the house in trust for himself and his mother, and soon introduced Shanti to Tara.
They seemed very happy. She was a beautiful, very nice person. I enjoyed meeting her.
Tara did not feel quite the same about Dave.
Dave's personality changed a little bit after the contract was signed. I just saw a very different side of him. He was like a guy or a child who wants to get their way, and they don't stop until they do.
You were glad when the deal was over?
Absolutely. I was very glad.
I didn't get a good feeling from him.
Cindy and Dan Dow are Shanti's relatives by marriage. They didn't like Dave at first, but it wasn't long before Cindy had a change of heart.
I love her, so I grew to love him. We absolutely adored him. The first time we had lunch, he walked in and he said, "How lucky am I? I get to have lunch with two of the most beautiful women that I know." I mean, that's charming.
In 2015, Dave and Shanti moved into their new home and attempted to remodel it with Shanti footing the bill.
What did Dave do all day?
It's a great question. If you ask Dave, he says that he worked on the house and worked on the renovations and took care of the property and cleaned the pool.
Contractors came and went. Demolition went on and on, but the renovation was an expensive failure. By 2018, the main part of the house was unlivable. Shanti was reduced to working and sleeping above the garage in a small apartment.
Where did Dave sleep?
I think he slept downstairs with the dogs. Maybe not all the time, but I'm pretty sure he was down there.
Desperate to resolve the housing situation, Dave turned to Keith Ory, a local house renovator who also appeared on a reality TV show called Zombie House Flipping.
Neighborhoods are under attack from zombie houses.
What is zombie house flipping?
Zombie House Flipping is a house flipping TV show where we take houses that are the worst of the worst.
Is anything broken?
I think we have a termite problem.
And what we do is bring them back to life. I looked at the house, I realized that the structure was suspect, and politely stepped outside.
An engineer discovered the only thing holding up the house was 2 inches of stucco.
It was rather astonishing. They took away all the interior dividing walls, and basically what was left was a 2-story shell.
Weren't you tempted to just run for the hills?
Yeah, but at the same time, you rarely come across a challenge that's that bold.
Keith was up for the challenge and began shoring up the interior. And then he got the go-ahead to use the house in the next season of Zombie House Flipping.
This is Zombie House Flipping.
It was mid-April 2018, and filming was set to begin in early May. But there was a problem.
Getting Dave and Shanti together to talk in person was proving to be really difficult.
Keith went to the house to meet with the couple one last time to be sure they were on board.
And they both said, yes, we understand. And then she took off immediately and left. I got a sense that she was pissed off at him.
Vecchio said Shanti had been trying for years to get her name on the trust that owned the house, but Dave never followed through.
And it seemed like things just sort of culminated to a boiling point.
It was only days before Shanti's murder. She desperately wanted stability in her life, but was living in a house that was anything but. Her name was not on the deed, and she had already spent a lot of money on what was essentially Dave's house.
Shanti was the bankroll, the sole bankroll to almost a $250,000 renovation.
What did she get for her $250,000?
Well, a lot of headaches and heartaches.
Shortly after Shanti was pronounced dead, Dave Tronas went to Orlando Police Headquarters.
I'll get her as soon as I can.
Where he remained without a lawyer for 14 hours.
We gotta figure this out together, okay?
Of course.
He didn't attempt to conceal anything.
Richard Zaleski is Dave's attorney.
He gave the law enforcement access to everything that they needed, everything that they wanted, and he laid himself out there for examination by all.
We wanna say how sorry we are for your loss.
At the start, Detectives Teresa Sprague and Barb Sharp seemed sympathetic.
Take a minute, okay? I know this is super tough.
They're very good at building rapport and have a tremendous amount of experience. If you have a suspect who's willing to talk, You just hit play and sit back and let them go on and on and on. And that's what Dave does.
Dave sticks with his story. He took the dogs to a park in the afternoon, and after he returned, he found Shanti, still wearing her pajamas, floating in the tub.
So I could hear the water is running. I see her laying. One of her legs is kind of sticking up and out a little bit. And it's just extremely awful.
Can you tell me what your address is?
He tells the detectives that he tried to perform CPR but couldn't get Shanti to breathe. She was dead when first responders arrived.
Dave has a lot to say, and a lot to say to try to convince the detectives that he wasn't involved in his wife's death.
I think something went wrong. Either she slipped or she fell or she blacked out.
Why did he agree to sit down and talk to these detectives without an attorney?
Because he had nothing to hide, and he didn't think that it would hurt him.
But the veteran detectives began to pick at his story and question how Shanti's bloody cheek and bruised eye came from a slip in the tub.
I don't have any explanation. This is what I found.
Somebody who slips and falls doesn't receive the amount of blunt force trauma to focused areas in the head.
Detectives also had spotted blood on Shanti's bed and suspected that's where she had been killed. But Dave says the blood likely was from Shanti's period.
It did get on the bedspread and it did get on the side of the bed.
There was a lot of other evidence that would be inconsistent with this being blood associated with a menstrual cycle.
Detectives also suspected, and Shanti's autopsy later confirmed, that she was strangled. But Selesky says, as frustrating as it may have been to authorities, Dave can't explain Shanti's injuries, not because he's lying, but because he simply doesn't know.
He took his best guess based upon what he come to find. He doesn't know what happened, is the point.
The detectives press on for hours, taking turns and peppering Dave with tougher and tougher questions.
Did you two argue?
No, absolutely not.
Did you fight?
Absolutely not.
Did you harm Shanti in any way?
Absolutely not.
Sharp and Sprague also question his timeline. Dave says that he called 911 about 5 minutes after he found Shanti.
You've got to help us understand.
But detectives insist that doesn't match what they found at the house.
There's no splashing of water anywhere in the bathroom. The inside of the tub is dry, completely dry, and she's damp. She's not even wet. So you've got to help us. Can you do that?
I've told you everything.
They're drawing conclusions based upon observations, and they're moving forward based upon these assumptions.
They try to zero in on a possible motive.
Did she catch you with another woman? Did she have a boyfriend? Was she about the house?
No.
But given the sorry state of the house, detectives begin to wonder if that had something to do with Shanti's murder.
I can't imagine how stressful it must have been. You know, not living in the home you want to live in, and it's taken 2+ years, 3 years.
I'm sick to death about what happened, but nothing happened today because of there was no animosity between us whatsoever.
And he says Shanti wasn't upset that her name wasn't on the trust that owned the house.
So we had kind of talked about it and debated it, and we finally just said it doesn't really matter. Let's just move forward.
Teresa and Barb are tenacious. They don't stop.
They're well-versed in interrogation techniques. You know, we saw the good cop, bad cop. We saw manipulation.
Barb Sharp even moves her hand to Dave's knee and adopts a more subtle tone.
It will be okay. We can't help you until you help us.
Before Teresa Sprague begins another attack.
She treats you like a landscaper, like the pool boy. Probably because she's bringing in the money.
As the hours tick by,
what do you want your mom to think about you?
They try anything they can to get him to confess.
Are you religious? You want to pray?
This almost became a game of psychological warfare in that interview room.
Dave began the interview by saying how happy he had been with Shanti. But almost 8 hours into the interrogation, the detectives aren't buying it.
You claim to love that woman? I would be under the table in a ball if I was in love with that woman and she was dead. I would be inconsolable.
Do you think that he was penalized because he didn't act the way detectives wanted him to act?
Oh, time and time again.
You know, you fake cried for about 7 or 8 hours today. Not one tear came out of your eyes, not one.
There's a lot of conclusions being drawn off of what they consider to be an odd affect of Mr. Tron's. And I think that that's a dangerous thing to do because we all react to stress differently, we all grieve differently.
Dave even agrees to take a polygraph, but by then it was the middle of the night. And investigators couldn't find anyone to administer it.
They had to let him go at the end of the interview. How did they feel about that?
You always want to make the arrest right up front. You do.
With Dave Tronis free, police would have to keep digging for clues. But even they were surprised by what they found.
Is it fair to say that Dave Tronis was living a double life?
At least 2 lives.
She didn't slip and fall. It's not a possibility.
Even though detectives were outright accusing Dave Tronis of murdering Shanti,
You strangled her.
some of her relatives, like Cindy Dow, believed him.
Are you kidding? I bet my last dollar that it wasn't him. I thought he was innocent.
You honestly did, Cindy. Why?
I think it was just the growth of our relationship and how she adored him, absolutely adored him, and it looked very mutual to everyone.
Did she ever express any concern or fear of Dave?
Never.
Never.
After being questioned by detectives, Dave headed straight to his home in Delaney Park, and that's where Cindy found him.
I stood him up and turned him around and looked at his arms, and there was not a scratch on him. There was nothing.
Cindy, did you ever ask him point blank, did you have something to do with the death of Shanti?
I did.
What did he say?
No. I would not kill the love of my life.
Defense attorney Richard Zaleski says the problem with this case is that detectives and prosecutors were convinced from the start that Dave Tronis was Shanti's killer. Zaleski says the bias of the investigators is clear from the police report.
They've already suggested that they have it figured out, like bull in a china shop trying to just make this work at all costs because they've done nothing to develop other suspects.
But Vecchio denies that. He says detectives checked out every possible suspect and got lucky when an important lead fell into their laps.
A worker from Club Orlando called and shared that they knew of Dave Tronis because he was a patron at the club.
What is Club Orlando?
Club Orlando is a same-sex bathhouse.
Did Dave have a membership at Club Orlando?
Several memberships. Every 6 months, Dave renewed his membership.
Detectives headed to the club to investigate and found a longtime club employee who, in this police-recorded interview, says he witnessed Dave having sex at the club.
I was just walking through and I saw David, he was giving oral sex to this guy.
From what everybody who knew Shanti has said, she would absolutely have not tolerated it, put up with it, endorse it. It just wouldn't have happened.
There's a significant possibility that Shanti knew all about it.
And why do you believe that? Because none of her family members seem to know anything about it, and her family members seem to indicate that if Shanti did know, she'd be upset.
And I appreciate that, but what you tell your mom and dad about your sex life and what you do behind closed doors, you know, people are people, adults are adults, and life is messy.
But Vecchio wonders if Shanti ultimately did discover Dave's duplicity on the night she was murdered. Had that revelation made Shanti threaten to turn off the money spigot once and for all?
But she would be killed because of a house?
Well, what would somebody do when they were about to lose the most important thing in their life? Because in April of 2018, the most important thing in Dave's life was that house.
Dave told Cindy and others that he believes Shanti may have been murdered by a burglar, and the defense claimed that $5,000 in cash was missing from the house. Also missing, Shanti's diamond engagement ring, valued at approximately $15,000.
That was highly, highly suspicious. The detectives wanted to get to the bottom of it.
Why couldn't it have been exactly as Dave said, that he leaves and someone breaks into the house, beats her, leaves her there, and Dave comes home? Why doesn't that fit?
Well, the lack of forced entry. This scene did not have any sort of evidence of a struggle. There's thousands of dollars of valuables that are left in plain sight.
A private investigator hired by defense lawyers canvassed neighbors, asking them about a particular homeless man who reportedly had been seen around Delaney Park. It was said he resembled the actor Woody Harrelson.
What about the transient that everyone describes who looks a lot like Woody Harrelson?
I mean, when you got nothing better, you throw everything against the wall and see if something sticks.
This home is at 218 East Copeland Drive.
Detective Teresa Sprague tracked Woody down and recorded this interview.
And you see there's a large blue dumpster in the driveway. Have you ever been there?
No.
Nothing placed Woody inside Dave and Shanti's home, but Vecchio says his interview shows police chased down every lead, including checking out her ex-husband.
Shanti had had a bad divorce. This was not an easy end of the marriage. Did you look at Jim Cooper?
Yes, Mr. Cooper was interviewed, and Jim Cooper was eliminated as a suspect very early on. He had an alibi.
On August 29, 2018, 4 months after Shanti's murder, Dave Tronis was arrested on a charge of first-degree murder and held without bail.
And how did the two of you react when you heard that?
I wasn't believing it whatsoever. I thought they were just trying to solve a murder easily.
I always had the suspicion.
Dave's arrest gave prosecutors another piece of the puzzle: Shanti's missing engagement ring.
The ring is probably one of the most powerful and damning pieces of evidence in this case.
As long as that expensive ring was missing, Dave Tronis could argue that a burglar had murdered Shanti. But the day he was arrested, police found it among his possessions.
We searched the room at his mother's house where he was living, and lo and behold, we found the rings in his suitcase in his bedroom.
Still, Dave's arrest was not the end of the investigation. It led to a cascading series of new revelations that surprised even a veteran prosecutor like Ryan Vecchio.
This was a case that had so many twists and turns, I would no longer make assumptions of anything. You don't learn this stuff in law school.
After the arrest of Dave Tronis, investigators received a tip that took them completely by surprise. It led them to Minnesota and back in time to when a much younger Dave was married to a woman named Carol. Former close friends of Carol told detectives that they believe Dave may have been poisoning her.
As soon as Carol got married to Dave, she started suffering a bunch of unknown health issues.
That made prosecutor Ryan Vecchio wonder if Shanti could have been poisoned.
In Shanti's case, she had appendicitis and had to have an appendectomy.
Shanti had had that emergency appendectomy 8 weeks before her death. Appendicitis and poisoning have similar symptoms, and Dave told detectives that Shanti had digestion problems right up to the day she died.
She hasn't found, since the appendectomy, a diet that she can eat regularly and feel good.
Vecchio needed more information, so he and Detective Teresa Sprague went to Minnesota in November of 2018 to meet Carol face-to-face and recorded this interview.
I have issues with chronic pain and immune system issues that are not necessarily definitive.
Carol told Vecchio she also struggled with gut issues and that Dave cooked most of their meals.
Has it ever come into your frame of thought that your marriage to David Tronis or him cooking or making you drinks was making you sick?
No.
Have you ever thought that any of your issues related to your health problems was him poisoning you?
No.
Carol said her health issues continued even after her divorce from Dave. Yet Vecchio says he remains suspicious.
It very well could have been a scenario to where Dave was providing both of them with items that caused them to be ill. We just could never have real concrete proof of it.
Vecchio wondered if there was another reason Carol seemed to be protecting her former husband and whether it had anything to do with Dave's finances.
We saw 1,000 pages of bank records belonging to Dave Tronis. One thing that we noticed was that Dave and Carol still had a joint bank account together.
That account at times contained hundreds of thousands of dollars, but Carol said she simply had forgotten to take her name off that account.
People who are divorcing each other don't leave assets on the table, and they sure as heck don't leave them together.
It's unclear where that money came from. Vecchio believes that Carol, who was not charged with any crime, could be helping Dave manage his money while he's in jail.
I think that Carol is involved in David's finances and has some level of control.
The surprises in the case kept coming. Soon after Shanti's death, detectives had placed a surveillance camera pointed toward the outside of Dave's house.
Detective Sprague was interested to see who was coming and going out of the house. And that camera ended up actually turning into a pretty valuable piece of evidence.
That camera captured images of private investigators hired by Dave's original law firm coming and going. Detectives believe that when one of those lawyers, Robert Mandel, realized that the PIs were on camera, he placed a call to Vecchio.
I never ever expected that he was going to tell me that he in fact had an item of physical evidence that he had been holding on to for 11 months. Never would have expected it in 1,000 years.
And what was that evidence?
They were a set of purported bloody sheets. And it literally took my breath away.
That defense attorney, Robert Mandel, told Vecchio that the defense team had acquired the bloody sheets from the garage apartment where Shanti was found dead, but had never turned them over to the prosecution.
But Ryan, as shocking as that is, that wasn't the only evidence that later turned up, was it?
No. I ended that call with the defense attorney and said, listen, if you have anything else, now is the time to tell me. And about 10, 12 hours later, the next morning, I got another call from him. And that's when he said, I have one other item that I think we have to turn over.
That item turned out to be a green cord. Mandel told Vecchio that a private investigator removed it from the house and preserved it in an evidence bag because Dave was threatening to kill himself.
Does that make sense to you?
No, makes zero sense to me. Why go get the item and then treat it as if it were a piece of evidence?
Remember, the autopsy revealed that Shanti had been strangled, and Vecchio believed there was a real possibility that the green cord could be the murder weapon. With the prosecution now in possession of that green cord, tests were conducted to see if indeed it was the murder weapon used to strangle Shanti.
Is there any evidence to indicate that, in fact, that cord was used to kill Shanti?
No, that cord did not have any DNA on it.
But the cord wasn't picked up until weeks after Shanti's death, and authorities believe Dave had plenty of time to clean it. Investigators had spent months examining all the evidence, leading Vecchio to craft his own theory about when Shanti was killed.
We found one single earring was placed on the nightstand. The other earring was in Shanti's ear.
And what does that say to you?
That tells me that Shanti was most likely sitting on the side of her bed, preparing for bed, taking those earrings out, and that's when the attack happened.
The sheets and bed frame did have Shanti's blood on them, and Shanti didn't use her phone after 11:30 p.m.
The scene was consistent with this attack happening somewhere in the midnight to 2-3 a.m. time period.
But David called 911 late in the afternoon saying he had just found Shanti floating in the tub. Zaleski says investigators are jumping to unfair conclusions.
A few hours of time off the grid doesn't allow them to shift the timeline.
Prosecutors continued to build their case even as Dave sat behind bars, listening to anyone who had information about Shanti's death, no matter how surprising the source.
I met David Tronis in 3 Whiskey.
3 Whiskey is a housing unit in the Orlando jail where Edward Gismondi shared a cell with Dave Tronis.
He slept next to me and I slept next to him.
After getting out of jail, Gismondi met with Vecchio and Sprague. He says that he and Dave began talking and bonded over a shared interest in obscure hallucinogenics, including sapo, a poison derived from a South American frog.
He said that you could use sapo to put in people's salsa and kill them quietly.
Killer's salsa might sound ridiculous, but not so far-fetched when you consider that authorities suspected that David poisoned both his wives. Gismondi supplied even more information that, if true, was truly damning. He says Dave admitted that he and Shanti had a fight before she died.
He just said there was an app on his phone that there was messages on that she had found, apparently, that suggested he was having sex with men. And she was going to show everybody.
And what did Dave say he did?
He snapped. He said he freaked out.
And did what?
He didn't specifically say that what he did, but that he had killed his wife.
Investigators were unable to corroborate Gismondi's story about the app.
We didn't have any purchase records of apps, and we did not see it on Dave's phone.
I've read your statement, and at no point do I see anywhere where you had told them that David actually said, I killed my wife. But sitting here now, you said, Dave told you, I killed my wife.
Yes, ma'am. In jail, he said, I killed my wife. Word for word is what he told me.
But why wouldn't you tell the state's attorney's office that?
I did. I told him that he had snapped. That's the word that I used. I don't remember if she had asked me, did he admit to murdering her? Like, word for word like that?
One of the few things both the prosecution and the defense do agree on is that neither is sure they can believe Gismondi. He pled guilty to 1 count of lewd or lascivious behavior and is now a registered sex offender and still on probation.
This individual certainly has credibility issues.
Zaleski took over Dave's defense in early 2020 after the original attorneys withdrew from the case.
Raising doubt isn't going to be difficult here.
But Shanti's family has no doubt about what should happen to Dave.
He has to be found guilty. He is guilty.
Cindy Dow, who once found Dave so charming, feels very differently about him now.
He should be sentenced to death. I want him to remember when he looks at me. I want him to remember every lie. Every lie.
When Cindy remembers Shanti, her heart still breaks.
She was happy, giving, kind, fun, loving person who had a mission in this life, and she didn't get to fulfill it.
Hi, this is Conrad Roy. I'm going to talk to you about social anxiety. Social anxiety, depression, it's controlling me. There's people that love me. I have a great mom, great dad. But I'm so depressed.
We spent the day walking the beach and we had a conversation and I asked him about school and he's like, I'm not sure what I'm gonna do. And I said, you know, don't worry about it. Everything is gonna be okay.
It was a nice day out with the family.
Nothing to give any hint of what was to come later in the day.
There was no indication anything was going on.
I've created a monster out of myself the past few years because of my depression. Racing thoughts, suicidal thoughts.
Do you remember when is the last time you saw your brother?
He was like going out the door. I thought he was just going to his friend's house.
You got up in the morning, and how did you know he hadn't come home?
He wasn't there, and we just like couldn't find him.
This is not like Conrad not to come home. Then they found his body and around 5:30 in the afternoon. And he died in his truck. Carbon monoxide poisoning. I will live with this forever, the pain.
Right away, we heard from investigators that the medical examiner found that it was a suicide. It wasn't until they started looking at his phone that they realized that there was something else going on here. Because on that phone were hundreds and hundreds of texts from Michelle Carter to Conrad Roy urging him to end his life.
You can't think about it. You just have to do it. You said you were gonna do it. Like, I don't get why you aren't.
And Michelle Carter admittedly said, do it. She was kind of making fun of him for not taking his own life.
I thought you really wanted to die, but apparently you don't. I feel played and just stupid. You're going to have to prove me wrong, because I just don't think you really want this.
And she kept pressuring him to do it.
You're ready and prepared. All you have to do is turn the generator on, and you be free and happy. No more pushing it off. No more waiting.
There was one point where he actually got out of the truck and changed his mind.
Yeah, he was scared.
And she told him to go back in the truck.
Yes.
Carter charged with involuntary manslaughter.
She faces up to 20 years in prison.
This is totally out of left field. I coached Michelle. I know her as a good kid.
I don't believe that she has a conscience. She knew exactly what she was doing and what she said.
Hang yourself, jump off a building, stab yourself. I don't know. There's a lot of ways.
And it's the texts that become the weapon.
How could she cause a death when she was 35 miles away?
In these circumstances, this is almost akin to loading the gun and handing it over. Who knows? Who knows when you have your hand on the trigger when you're sending a text?
It's not realistic. What's going in my head that keeps on piling and piling and piling.
1 month before 18-year-old Conrad Roy took his own life, when the minds of many teens wander to carefree summer days, Conrad's thoughts were more serious, introspective.
I need to be comfortable in my skin.
Sitting at his computer in his home in Fairhaven, Massachusetts, Conrad recorded his thoughts on coping with his depression.
I need to relax. I really do.
He wanted to excel. He was just wanted to be this like great person. But in my eyes,
Conrad's mother, Lynn, explains that her son could be his own toughest critic.
he was rough on himself. He really struggled with just disappointing, I think, myself and his dad.
And the sooner I like myself, the better I'm going to be.
Lynn Roy thought her son was getting better.
I do have a lot going for me.
He was getting professional help and on an antidepressant, Celexa. He had been licensed to be a tugboat captain like his dad.
That's a huge accomplishment, to be a captain.
Had just graduated high school, and college with a scholarship was on the horizon.
And he was doing everything that was positive, that was, looking towards his future.
But on July 12, 2014, Conrad drove to a parking lot and, using a gasoline-powered water pump, sat in his pickup truck as it filled with carbon monoxide, knowingly inhaling the deadly fumes, killing himself. All the while, his friend Michelle Carter, then 17, was encouraging Conrad from more than 30 miles away on her phone to take his own life.
I don't understand why you would want someone that was so beautiful inside and out, that had so much, that was such a kind person, to die.
How do you describe what this young woman did?
I cannot. Only she can.
The intersection of the lives of Michelle Carter and Conrad Roy has left a trail of heartbreak and questions about the circumstances that led to such a tragic death.
He's one of the kindest persons. He grew up very sensitive, very humble and kind.
Happy child.
Very happy. Many pictures of him smiling, laughing, until he became a teenager, and I don't know if it was the hormones. He just, became anxious.
Conrad was the oldest child in the family with 2 sisters, Morgan and Camden. Lynn and Conrad's father separated when Conrad was 16, and their divorce hit him especially hard.
I think he was just more worried about me. That's what boys do. They worry about their moms a lot.
Conrad would confide in his friend Ariana Taylor as they spent hours walking along the water.
He wasn't able to explain it to me in a way that I could understand, so he kind of just described it as a darkness and how there would be times where he just kind of wanted to isolate himself from everybody.
Conrad's anxiety and self-doubt had troubled Lynn since he was 16.
He started having trouble sleeping, and we got him treated. And then he had his first suicide attempt a year after, the age of 17.
Conrad had overdosed on acetaminophen.
I worked in a psychiatric hospital, and I never imagined that one of my children would have those feelings.
Do you think he really intended to kill himself at that point?
He did contact a friend.
That friend was Ariana.
He told me that he was really sick and that his mom had just left and that he wanted her to come back.
Ariana immediately got in touch with Conrad's parents, who brought him to the hospital.
He told me, Mom, I'd never do that again. He was sorry. And I was sorry as well that he felt that way.
The fact that he wanted you to call his mother, what does that say to you?
It just says that he was calling out for help. That he didn't actually mean what he was doing, but he really needed help, and that this was the only way he kind of thought that he would really get help.
And that help seemed to be working.
He actually was getting a lot better. He told me about how he was going out. He was going to, the high school parties and just hanging out with everybody. I was like, that's amazing.
Michelle Carter was another friend of Conrad's. They met in 2012 while both were vacationing in Florida. Conrad and his sisters were visiting relatives who happened to know Michelle.
How would you describe Michelle? Friendly?
Yeah, she's really friendly. She always made Conrad laugh.
As it turned out, Michelle lived just a few towns over from the Roys in Massachusetts, and the relationship continued after the vacation. But while Michelle called Conrad her boyfriend, his family says the two rarely saw each other, and like so many teens, their interactions were mostly over text messages.
Had your son ever mentioned Michelle Carter?
Yes. After they met in Florida, I met her 2013 at his baseball game, and that was the only time I ever met her. Second time was at his wake.
Michelle and Conrad shared something in common that Lynn did not know. Michelle had her own struggles, including an eating disorder, and both teens at times took antidepressants.
Probably the attraction was they both had their issues.
Softball coach Ed McFarland has known Michelle Carter and her family for a decade. The Michelle he knows is an ideal teammate.
I've never seen her do a mean thing. I've never seen her be mean.
Michelle's high school yearbook paints a picture of an active, well-liked student, one voted class clown, and most likely to brighten your day. But that would not be how her actions would be described on the last day of Conrad's life. That day started out seemingly happy for Conrad, spending time with his family.
That morning on the 12th, what was his mood like?
It was fine. He wanted to, go to the beach with the girls.
While there, Camden at one point noticed her brother sitting alone, texting.
Did you know who he was texting with?
No.
Now you think he was texting with Michelle Carter.
Yeah.
But you didn't know that at the time. And what was his demeanor?
I don't know, he kind of seemed anxious, when he was texting.
Conrad then took his sisters out for ice cream, where his mood seemed to lift.
And when you think back on that, would you have ever guessed there was anything wrong that afternoon?
No.
After going home, Conrad left at about 6 p.m., telling his mother he was going to see a friend.
And I asked him if he was going to be back for dinner, and he said he didn't think so, and that was the last words that he spoke to me.
It was July 12, 2014, the heart of summer in New England. Conrad Roy had headed out in his pickup truck around 6 p.m. As the evening passed, Lynn checked to see when he'd be home.
And I texted him, I don't know, before I went to bed, maybe around 10:30, 11, and then I texted him again in the middle of the night.
Conrad didn't respond. Still, Lynn figured everything was okay. She believed he had beaten back much of his anxieties. That night, Conrad's sister Camden unexpectedly heard from Michelle Carter, that 17-year-old who had battled her own mental health issues and lived about an hour away.
How surprised were you that you suddenly got a text from Michelle?
And I thought she was just like his friend, but in the text, she said, like, we're boyfriend and girlfriend now. And I was just like, I looked at my mom, I was like, they are?
Whether teenage love or something else, Michelle was sending out the word. Had anyone heard from Conrad Roy?
And what did she text you exactly?
She was like, hey Camden, like, do you know where your brother is?
Was that unusual for him not to come home?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That was not like him at all.
It was sunrise and still not a word.
So in the morning, I went to by Ariana's house and he wasn't there.
And so that's when I began to search. Where is he? What happened?
We went by Dad's house. There's no sign of him. Maybe an hour later, I felt like this rush go through my body that I've never felt in my life. And I felt at that point that he wasn't with me.
On the afternoon of July 13th, police found him inside his pickup truck, parked at the local Kmart, his cell phone right next to him.
And he died in his truck. Carbon monoxide poisoning.
Like, got in the car and my mom was just like crying, like the most I ever seen her cry. And she was like, he's gone. And like, she was just like, your brother's gone.
It still hurts just as much as it did then, doesn't it?
I will live with this forever, the pain.
Like, I don't get why it happened. Why did it happen? Why did it happen to him?
And Michelle seemed to take Conrad's death as hard as anyone. Once again, a text was her choice of communication, this time to Lynn. I am so very sorry. Conrad meant so much to me. No one questioned the suicide until cops got a hold of Conrad Roy's phone. It would prove to be an investigation like no other. No gun, no knife, no crucial DNA in this case. Only this, a trail of words, starting with those on the cell phone. Messages with Michelle Carter.
And once investigators found this dialogue, they knew that there was something else up. And they wanted to get to the bottom of it.
Former Boston Herald legal columnist and 48 Hours consultant Bob McGovern.
And so this thing turned from a suicide investigation into a homicide investigation.
Michelle seemed to be encouraging Conrad not to live, but to die. Texts flew between the two of them for more than a week, right up to the moment he took his own life. I'm determined. I'm happy to hear that. When you get back from the beach, you gotta do it. No more thinking. Yes, no more thinking. You need to just do it. But now, with Conrad Roy dead, Michelle seemed devastated, acting as if his death was a total surprise.
When it came to the funeral, she sat up close to kind of where the family area was. I always described her as seen as the grieving widow. She was just constantly like sobbing.
And 2 months later, Michelle even held a fundraiser to honor Conrad in her town of Plainville. That fall, investigators interviewed Michelle Carter at her high school.
Do you think you had contact with him that day?
I think so.
But Michelle's story was riddled with holes, and police weren't buying it. They poured through her cell phone. Her texts ranged from urgent to ominous, like one sent to her friend Samantha Boardman on July 12th at 8:02 p.m. just minutes after police believe Conrad killed himself. He just called me. I heard moaning like someone was in pain, and he wouldn't answer when I said his name. That text was followed by another. I think he just killed himself. Michelle was texting her friend, but what she wasn't doing was calling for help. And there was at least one more text found on Conrad's phone that now seems telling. Only moments before he died, Michelle asked him this: "Did you delete the messages?" Police would extract more than 1,000 deleted text messages between Conrad and Michelle. Some showed his fear and reluctance to take his life on the very day he died. I don't know, I'm freaking out again. I do want to, but like I'm freaking out for my family. But even as Conrad panicked and considered abandoning his plan to die, Michelle egged him on. She described it to her friend Samantha that September in this text. "Sam, his death is my fault. Like, honestly, I could have stopped him. I was on the phone with him, and he got out of the car because it was working, and he got scared, and I effing told him to get back in." The road to justice would be complicated. Massachusetts has no law against encouraging or assisting suicide. And Michelle was miles away when Conrad died.
People don't realize in our generation, texting does a lot. It's like having the person right there in front of you when you're texting somebody.
And the Supreme Court of Massachusetts seems to agree. In the summer of 2016, the court ruled that even though Michelle was an hour away when Conrad Roy died, she had a virtual presence that night in that pickup truck. It's a controversial legal theory born out of a digital world. And so nearly 3 years later, Michelle Carter will stand trial in this courtroom for involuntary manslaughter. Michelle's attorneys, fearing how the text would play, advised her to waive her right to a jury trial. She put her fate in the hands of veteran judge Lawrence Moniz.
Are you doing that of your own free will, knowingly and voluntarily?
Yes.
See more of Michelle Carter's texts to Conrad Roy on Facebook at 48 Hours.
She assisted and devised and advised and planned his suicide.
Inside this Massachusetts courtroom, Michelle Carter, now 20 years old, looks more like a prep school student than a criminal defendant.
And on July 12th, 2014, as his truck was filling with carbon monoxide, he was scared. He got out. It was the defendant on the other end of the phone who ordered him back in, then listened for 20 minutes as he cried in pain, took his last breath, and died.
The alleged weapon in this case? Michelle Carter's own words.
What she did, in theory, according to the prosecutors, is she recklessly caused Conrad Roy's death.
The state's case revolves around Michelle's chilling text messages to Conrad as he was apparently having second thoughts the day he took his life.
The defendant texted Conrad, "You can't think about it, you just have to do it. You said you were going to do it. I don't get why you aren't."
And then there was this. 10 days before he died, Michelle sent him this text message assuring him not to worry about his family's feelings. Yeah, they'll probably blame themselves for a while, but they will get over it and learn to accept it, a notion that baffles and upsets Conrad's mother.
I think she needs to be held responsible for her actions because she knew exactly what she was doing.
Lynn Roy testified that on the last day of his life, Conrad was in a good frame of mind.
He was eating tortilla chips and guacamole on the way to the beach.
In July of 2014, did he ever mention he wanted to harm himself?
No. I knew he was a little depressed, but I thought he was doing great.
But prosecutors contend that Michelle and her incessant texting had immense influence over Conrad,
even though Michelle was more than 30 miles away from him when he took his life, that her virtual presence caused him to do it.
She helped him devise a plan to kill himself using a combustion engine to poison himself with carbon monoxide gas.
Michelle sent Conrad this text message: "I'm not going to sleep until you are in the car with a generator on."
Your Honor, this case is a suicide case. It is not a homicide.
But defense attorney Joseph Cataldo painted a very different picture.
The evidence of the texting is overwhelming that Conrad Roy was on this path to take his own life for years. Michelle Carter was not present. Michelle Carter had been texting with him. She did not physically see this individual for over 1 year.
The defense brings up Conrad's acetaminophen overdose when he was 17 and claims he had been suicidal for years, in part because of his parents' divorce, and he had a contentious relationship with his father. And if the judge is considering Michelle's text messages, he should look at all the messages between the teenagers. Even up to a month before Conrad's death, Michelle seemed like a concerned friend, trying to help a socially awkward and emotionally fragile Conrad. On June 19th, Michelle texts Conrad, "Are you 100% positive you're never going to commit suicide? Be honest with me. Do you think about doing it?" "No, I'm not." In other messages, she talks about wanting to take him to a therapist or a mental health hospital. But on July 1st, 11 days before his suicide, texts between Michelle and Conrad took a sinister turn. Prosecutors let the words tell the story.
She talked him out of his doubts, point by point. She assured him that his family would understand why he did it. She researched logistics.
Michelle had been sending Conrad suggestions on how to kill himself for weeks. Hanging is painless and takes like a second if you do it right. But what would drive anyone to send a text like that? Prosecutors say Michelle was desperate for friends and attention, and she got it when she talked about her suicidal boyfriend. Just days before he died, she sent texts to girls she wanted to be close with in an effort to get their attention and sympathy.
Lexi Evelyn, please.
Pretending Conrad was missing.
Do you remember getting a message about Conrad being missing?
Yes. He's missing, like they don't know where he is.
Prosecutors say Conrad still being alive presented a problem for Michelle. She could be exposed as a liar. So it was important he kill himself. On July 12th, the night he did take his life, Conrad drove to a Kmart parking lot and texted Michelle, "Leaving now. Okay, you can do this. Okay, I'm almost there." That was the last text Conrad ever sent to anyone. But there was also a 46-minute phone call. Michelle called him. She was the last person to speak with him. After that call ended, Michelle texted her friend Samantha.
I'm going to ask you to read that text message, please, aloud.
Sam, he just called me and there was a loud noise like a motor and I heard moaning like someone was in pain and he wouldn't answer when I said his name. I stayed on the phone for like 20 minutes and that's all I heard.
Then, 27 minutes later, Michelle sent Samantha another text message.
I think he just killed himself.
Prosecutors say Michelle, within hours, began building a virtual alibi. Knowing that he was likely dead, she began acting like a concerned friend, sending Conrad this text message: "I'm scared. Are you okay? I love you. Please answer." Michelle showed little emotion at the trial. Her defense relies on this psychiatrist, Peter Bregan, to explain her behavior, even though he was not treating Michelle at the time. He testifies that she was involuntarily intoxicated by an antidepressant drug she started taking 3 months earlier, Celexa.
She was enmeshed in a delusion where she's thinking that it's a good thing to help him die.
But prosecutors completely dismiss that theory.
She does not tell the Roy family about being on the phone with Conrad the night before, does she? His dead body is in a car 24 hours, and she withholds that information.
Inexplicably, Michelle sent more than 80 texts to Conrad after he died. In some, she even apologizes for not saving him. But it wasn't just Conrad she texted. The prosecution is hoping the judge pays particular attention to this text that she sent to her friend Samantha a week after Conrad's body was discovered. They have to go through his phone and see if anyone encouraged him to do it on text and stuff. They read my messages with him, I'm done. His family will hate me, and I could go to jail.
Her actions, Your Honor, on July 12, 2014, caused the death of Conrad Roy. They were reckless, and she knew it.
According to the prosecution, Michelle Carter helped put Conrad Roy in his grave.
It was a felony, and she caused serious bodily harm.
According to the defense, she didn't know what she was doing.
Good morning, Your Honor.
She was psychotic, delusional, involuntarily intoxicated from taking the antidepressant Celexa.
Michelle Carter underwent an involuntary intoxication in June and July.
To prominent child and adolescent psychiatrist Dr. Harold Koplowitz, that makes no sense at all. Though not a witness in this case, he says those drugs, called SSRIs, are remarkably safe.
They don't make you delusional. They don't make you psychotic.
And they don't make you intoxicated.
They don't make you drunk.
Dr. Koplowitz believes the act of texting was more mind-altering than any drug.
And the problem with texts is that it separates you. It makes you feel less responsible.
But no amount of distance can explain her behavior, especially the prosecution's contention that Michelle ordered Conrad back into the truck, says the doctor.
It's very hard to understand where the man says to a friend, listen, I'm feeling pain. I don't want to do this. I'm going to get out of the car. There's no way to seem to make sense of the fact that someone then says, a friend says, get back in the car and kill yourself. This really has a vicious and a very, very malicious quality to it.
No matter how malicious, Dr. Koplowitz says, Michelle really couldn't have convinced Conrad to kill himself if he hadn't already been suicidal.
So while Michelle could not force Conrad to kill himself, she could enhance his risk of killing himself. She could encourage him to complete the act because he was already on his way. And simultaneously, she could have screamed out for help, which might have prevented this deadly outcome.
I want to recover from this, and I feel like I haven't recovered from it yet. I feel like I still have a long way to go.
Clearly, these heartbreaking videos now posted on YouTube show a young man looking for that different outcome, says Dr. Koplowitz.
You expose yourself like this, it says, please help me.
I've created a monster out of myself the past few years because of my depression.
Sadly, Conrad Roy is not alone. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, we lose approximately 4,600 young people between the ages of 10 and 24 to suicide each year. One reason is that teenagers are simply more prone to depression. Another reason, they're more susceptible to peer pressure. Which is why the Netflix show 13 Reasons Why has caused such an uproar. In the show, a teenage girl dies by suicide and leaves 13 recordings to other teens whom she blames.
I think it's one of the most dangerous programs on the air right now for the simple reason that it glamorizes suicide. Unfortunately, suicide's very contagious. We know that teenagers who watch these kind of TV programs are more likely to think about suicide, are more likely to attempt suicide, are more likely to commit suicide.
It appears that Michelle Carter may have been one of those teens influenced by what she saw on TV. Not 13 Reasons Why, but perhaps an episode of Glee. When an actor on Glee died of an overdose in real life, the show wrote his death into the script. Listen to the similarities between what the character Rachel says about the loss of her boyfriend and what Michelle later says about losing Conrad.
I had it all planned out. We would live happily ever after.
It's a good plan. Did you tell him?
I didn't have to. He knew.
Michelle's text to a friend after Conrad's death is almost word for word. I had it all planned out. He knew, too. I didn't have to tell him.
He was my person.
Michelle writes the exact same line. He was my person.
Poor her. Her boyfriend died. They were going to get married one day, and now she's the grieving girlfriend.
According to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, it all boiled down to that starring role as the grieving girlfriend.
The Commonwealth's position, Your Honor, is that she wanted attention.
After 6 days of testimony, closing arguments begin. The defense is up first.
The evidence actually establishes that Conrad Roy caused his own death.
Joe Cataldo reminds the judge that Conrad had attempted suicide before and points to a text Conrad wrote to Michelle.
There's nothing anyone can do for me that's gonna make me want to live. It's very bad to hear, but I want to let you know that truthfully.
The decision to die was Conrad's, not Michelle's, says Cataldo.
He created this situation, Your Honor.
Most importantly, Michelle was nowhere near Conrad when he killed himself.
There's no evidence that Michelle Carter has any physical actions whatsoever in this case with Conrad Roy's decision. It was all of his physical activity.
But prosecutor Katie Rayburn gets the last word.
Although she wasn't physically present, she was in his ear, she was in his mind, she was on the phone, and she was telling him to get back in the car, even though she knew he was going to die. She absolutely knew it was wrong, and she absolutely caused the death of this 18-year-old boy. And I ask you to find her guilty.
Three days after Judge Moniz began his deliberations, two families prepared themselves for his verdict.
Mr. Roy.
For the Carter family, freedom is at stake. For the Roys, it's about justice for their son.
She instructs Mr. Roy to get back into the truck, well knowing of all of the feelings that he has exchanged with her, his ambiguities, his fears, his concerns.
The judge said Carter caused a dangerous environment, and under Massachusetts law, she had a duty to save him.
She called no one. She did not issue a simple additional instruction. Get out of the truck. Ms. Carter, please stand. This court, having reviewed the evidence and applied the law thereto, now finds you guilty on the indictment charging you with the involuntary manslaughter of the person Conrad Roy III.
Guilty. A verdict that is groundbreaking in terms of recognizing the deadly power of words, but one that leaves no winners, just heartbreak.
I know we all wish that he had the opportunity to grow up into adulthood, to become a tugboat captain, and to enjoy his future.
Nearly 7 weeks after being convicted, Michelle Carter, who is out on bail, arrives for sentencing, where hostile words greet her. She could face 20 years in prison.
Please remain standing for one moment while you are sworn.
First, Conrad's father and sister recall a life cut short.
Not a day goes by without him being my first thought waking up and my last thought going to bed.
Michelle Carter exploited my son's weaknesses
and used him as a pawn in her own well-being. She has not shown any remorse. Where was her humanity?
The prosecutor reads a statement from Conrad's mother, Lynn, who found it too difficult to speak.
I do not know where to begin. I pray that his death will save lives someday.
Lynn wants to make it a crime to encourage suicide.
I pray that a law comes forth so that another mother does not have to endure what I am. I do not believe that another can go on to encourage someone to take their life, and it can be okay.
The prosecution asks that Carter serve 7 to 12 years behind bars.
She has shown no remorse, and in fact, after Conrad's death, she sought attention and sympathy for herself. All she had to do was say, "Get out of the car."
Michelle Carter does not speak at sentencing, but her attorney does and asks for probation.
Ms. Carter does regret what happened. She also sent a letter to the probation department where she accepts responsibility. This is a terrible, terrible tragedy, and she very much regrets this and prays Your Honor's judgment of leniency.
Then Michelle Carter learns her fate.
Ms. Carter, please stand.
He sentences Michelle Carter to 15 months behind bars, a sentence that does not please the defense, who appealed the conviction.
We're asking you, Your Honor, to stay the jail sentence until we can have our day in court.
The judge takes the request seriously, recognizing the significance of this case.
The conviction may be reversible, but the time spent in prison is not.
And then makes a stunning announcement.
That a grant of a stay through the Massachusetts court system only is warranted.
A stay, meaning Michelle Carter would be out on probation, not in jail, while her appeal made its way through the Massachusetts courts. It was a decision that disappointed Lynn Roy and her daughters.
We're just going to honor his life and do it in the best way we can. We want him to be proud of us.
All rise!
In February of 2019, Michelle Carter's conviction was upheld.
Ms. Carter will now be taken into custody.
And she began serving her 15-month sentence. Her lawyers appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. The court declined to hear that appeal. In response, her lawyers issued the following statement: "We are deeply disappointed that the Supreme Court has decided not to review Michelle Carter's wrongful conviction." Lynn Roy's focus now is on changing laws.
What would you like there to be? What kind of law?
I would love one in honor of him, his name, Conrad's Law.
There's people that love me. I have a great mom.
My son mattered. He matters. Will always matter. Someone that had a family and future and mom and dad. I will never get over him.
A beautiful ballerina, a troubled marriage, a deadly confrontation.
She tells the neighbor, "I shot Doug in self-defense."
Was she genuinely afraid or just trying to get her way?
Underneath those white feathers, she's an evil woman. She's the Black Swan.
48 Hours, Saturday at 10/9 Central on CBS.